if you don't do the work to stay connected, you will drift apart romantically. Our grandmas and grandpas that were together for 60 years and stuff, they will tell you, if you sat them down, they will say, oh, we haven't been a sexy romantic couple for decades, but we stick together. And then one or both of them will say, and I'm not really happy with the situation. We don't realize just how common back in the good old days affairs were. That's something that's kind of unspoken. We don't like to talk about that. We don't like to talk about these days just how common not so nice things such as pornography use and everything else are. It's a big, huge, rampant problem out there. And this is all in response to a very real disconnect between the two people. If you don't do certain things at the right time and face a lot of your own insecurities and realize how it is that the work you need to do, both of you, to keep the relationship going in that way, you naturally drift apart in that way. And your relationship basically becomes like that of a roommate or friends. So you need to know how to address that.
Hello, Ralph. It's so nice to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Beautiful, my man, and thank you so very much for being here. I truly appreciate you. Thank you so very much for investing in yourself. I love to make reference to the amazing mango tree. Ralph, a lot's changed about the mango tree, I got the urge to move so close to it, of which I did, and it wowed me. And not just mangoes now, Ralph. I'm talking about ripe mangoes. It was such a lovely experience that day. The fact that you dedicated your time, energy, and resources to becoming the amazing Ralph that you are today, that alone has made it impossible for me to skip you. And that's why you got the request from me to be on the show solutions, Ralph. This stuff's a beautiful audience. And here we are today with the amazing Ralph. So thank you so very much for doing that yourself. Thanks so much, my man.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that intro. I like it. I've never been compared to a mango tree before. So that's a first. So thank you. I'll take it. With a bald head, I've been called an egg. I've been called a toe. I've been called a thumb, but never a mango. But I can see. So thank you.
Well, thank you so very much for being here once again, my man. And I truly appreciate you. So let's get started. I am quite excited to have you on the show today for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking. I believe in order for one to transition from a terrible situation to that of a beautiful one, Ralph, I believe it takes the application of knowledge, quality information, and not just knowledge alone, but the application of it. And you see, my man, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness, ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking. Why? Because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that's going to make our conversation today very important to me and even to the listeners. And the second reason why I'm excited to have the incredible Ralph on the show is for the sake of the audience. You see, my man, we live in an age where information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got lots of information flying out there. So these folks trust me for quality, eye-opening, and very important information, of which I am totally convinced, Ralph, in our conversation is going to be insightful and impactful. So for that reason, my man, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your personal or your professional journey, because right now we are so curious. Want to know how Ralph got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Ralph, over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I do appreciate it, my friend. But my name is Ralph Brewer, and I am an author. I'm a speaker, coach, and the founder of helpformen.com and a private support community for men only called the Help for Men Brotherhood. And your listeners can learn more at helpformen.com/join if they are interested in joining a like-minded group of hundreds and hundreds of men from all over the world that get together just to help each other get through life. My story and how I started all this was approximately 13 years ago, I went through a pretty nasty divorce. pretty horrible time in my life. And one moment I was very comfortable, secure, safe within a relationship. And literally the next day, everything just fell apart, unbeknownst to me. And I became a single father to 3 little kids. And that was a very, very trying time in my life where it called into question every aspect of who I am and what I stand for. What is my identity? And what I thought was already written out for me life wise suddenly took a left turn. And I didn't know how to cope with it too well. And I did go to a therapist and read tons of books. And one thing that came out from therapy that stuck with me more than anything else was the therapist saying, you are like every other man that comes in here. You don't have many other men in your life at all. You don't have much in the way of friends and a tribe and a community to help you on your journey. You're very alone. And you, like a lot of men, think that's a good thing, that you're a lone wolf and you can take care of yourself. And that's not good. And she, in turn, introduced me to somebody else that she had as a client who was going through much of what I was going through. And then I realized, oh, wow, there's a whole community of us men out there. And I started writing on the subject online and it started getting some attention. And I wrote books. My most popular book that I've written is one called The Dead Bedroom Fix. And it's my thoughts on sex and marriage, which, as you know, sex sells. Everyone likes to learn about sex. But I learned that that's the biggest pain point for married men is the lack of intimacy in a marriage. They love their wife more than anything, and they're not feeling very connected to their spouse. So that's a huge issue. But I've also written books on divorce, and my most recent book is called Rebuild, and you can learn more about it at helpformen.com. I also have rebuild.com, and it's for men that are very much facing a very real crossroad moment in their life. Like, this isn't what I planned. Who am I? What do I stand for? And I talk all about recreating yourself and starting over from scratch and realizing that you can be whatever it is you want to be. But a lot of us, myself included, have a lot of childhood baggage and things that get in the way of realizing just what it is that you stand for and what your values are. And when you set aside your title of father, employee, husband, when you have, for example, a lot of guys that are divorced face the time of, wow, this week I don't have the kids. And obviously I don't have my wife anymore. She's gone. And some people go through a major job moment. My job just said, we don't need you anymore after 20 years. Suddenly you're left without these titles and you're like, who am I? What do I stand for? What do I want out of life? That's what Rebuild, my latest book, is about. And it's actually done very well. It's been out for about a week. And as of this past week, it's my #1 bestseller, out eclipsing The Dead Bedroom Fix, first book to do that. So it's obviously touched a nerve with a lot of guys. We have a lot of guys going through that right now, a major life moment of, I don't know who I am. So that's what I went through, and that's what that book is all about.
You went through it and you created a solution for it, and that's so beautiful. So I'm just going to begin the questions from here. All right. Let's begin from your beautiful book, the title, Dead Bedrooms. So why are dead bedrooms so common today?
It's not that it's common today necessarily. It's very common within long-term monogamous marriages, relationships, period. I don't care how connected you are as a couple, how in love you are at the early stages of the relationship, how they're your soulmate and everything else that goes with it. If left to its own devices, if you don't do the work to stay connected, you will drift apart romantically. Our grandmas and grandpas that were together for 60 years and stuff, they will tell you, if you sat them down, they will say, oh, we haven't been a sexy romantic couple for decades, but we stick together regardless. And then one or both of them will say, and I'm not really happy with the situation, but it is what it is. We don't realize just how common back in the good old days affairs were. That's something that's kind of unspoken. We don't like to talk about that. We don't like to talk about these days just how common not so nice things such as pornography use and everything else are. It's a big, huge, rampant problem out there. And this is all in response to a very real disconnect between the two people. If you don't do certain things at the right time and face a lot of your own insecurities and realize how it is that the work you need to do, both of you, to keep the relationship going in that way, you naturally drift apart in that way. And your relationship basically becomes like that of a roommate or friends. So you need to know how to address that. And a lot of the men that I work with are also what we call, psychologists call, very anxiously attached to their partner. They're the one that's always pursuing, and their partner's always the one that's saying, no, thank you, I don't want that. So that's who that book is for.
Got it. I got that. So is that the reason why some women cheat and vice versa?
It's part of it. A lot of it, when I do speak to a lot of men who have been cheated on, and I will talk to them about, tell me about your wife. Invariably, 10 times out of 10, I will hear a lot of horror stories about her childhood. She came from a very bad childhood. Dad left. Mom was an alcoholic. Mom was narcissistic. She had to raise herself. These are common things that I hear. And she got with a man who was easily controllable because she had to have control of a lot of things in her life. So she gets with the codependent Mr. Nice Guy type of guy, and the relationship invariably kind of fizzles, and you lose a lot of that connection. And that wife needs that initial spark of novelty, of newness within the relationship to keep things going, and that naturally fizzles out. And she doesn't have much in the way of boundaries, and away she goes in the form of an affair. That's one such scenario. There are a lot of different scenarios involved. I've talked to some women who reach out to me directly to say their husband is disabled sexually. He's not able to perform in any way due to stroke, heart attack, whatever it may be. And she feels very disconnected and she feels horrible about it, but she still has very real needs. So she may cheat for that reason. There's all kinds of reasons why people cheat.
That's so true, all kinds. And you see, when I came across a particular post as to the man deciding to, divorce his wife, not because she cheated on him or because she did something, but the reason was, he said, his wife lacked proper sex education. And this stuff is getting to be a problem, and he cannot keep going on with it. I was really shocked that do people get divorced for reasons like this? So that curiosity led me to invite a very fantastic guest, and I think that was a week ago now. So she shared about how important it is for both spouse to understand this thing called sex and how important intimacy is. Then she did some very interesting research, and oh boy, I was really amazed at the things that she said. So now that's gonna lead to the second question: how can couples reignite intimacy after years together?
There are a myriad of different ways of doing it. And at baseline, to introduce some level of novelty to this, I have some men, novelty meaning newness. I have some men that achieve this by recreating themselves physically. You have a guy who's 100 pounds overweight and he suddenly loses a lot of weight and he looks really, really good. And he's starting to get attention from others, including his wife. And his wife says, oh, thank goodness, I got my husband back. I remember one guy in particular who sticks out to me. He was a university athlete. And then when he got married, he just let himself go. And he's like, I don't need to worry about that anymore. And he didn't realize how much that bothered his wife to see that side of him go away, not just the physical, but his whole personality shifted. He became super comfortable and I don't care about me anymore. And I obviously don't have to work for us anymore. I already got the wife. And when he went back to his old self, his wife literally said, thank goodness I got my husband back. So that's one example of how reintroducing the old him and a new version of him, if you will, even though it was kind of a rewind into the old version of him, that kind of resparked things and it brought them back together again and it got them talking more again and it got them being very open about what each other wants. That was great. That's a beautiful thing. Versus some people take it to the extreme, which I don't recommend or condone necessarily. And I'm not shaming them for doing this, but some people introduce others into the relationship in the form of open relationships and so forth. And some of those people say, that really reignited things. Now we are closer together sexually as a couple. But then a lot of people I talk to that do that then say, oh, now we're divorced because we've just introduced a whole other person or persons into the relationship. A lot of drama. Somebody fell in love with somebody and away they go. So overall, it's one of honesty, communication, setting aside your ego and recognizing this is what I want. This is what I need. Now, the problem is some people realize, you know what? We never really were connected in that way. The only reason I stuck with you is because I didn't really think much of myself. This is a lot of guys that I talked to. She was the first girl that liked me. She was the first girl that didn't run away from me. Everybody else kind of turned me down. And I saw this one that liked me and I didn't want to let her go. Even though I saw 20, 30 years ago that we have this incompatibility, we still stuck it out because I didn't think I had any other choice. And then they put up with 20, 30 years of a really yuck relationship. And then they do the work of trying to reconnect and be open and honest with each other and communicate with each other. And they go to the counseling, and then they realize this wasn't a good move so many years ago. I love you, but it's just not going to work in that way anymore. And that's fine. If they both mutually agree to that, you can still be, amicable and on friendly terms and loving terms, but just not as a romantic couple. And that's cool. And they may find other people that are more compatible with them. So it's kind of a heavy, deep question of like, how do we rekindle this? A lot of different ways. Check out my book, Dead Bedroom Fix. You can go to deadbedroomfix.com to check it out. Any of your listeners, or helpformen.com. All of our books are on there as well. But like I say, that's the most impactful topic I've ever spoken about is sex and marriage. That just shows you how difficult it is for a lot of people.
Tell you. And I truly appreciate the beautiful stuff you're doing, because men who go through divorce and come out of it, nah. I must truly salute them. Because I remember going through breakup, my first ever relationship. Oh boy, when the lady said, Elisha, you know what? I am not interested again. Ha ha. It was as though the whole of hell was loosed, and every demons in it were after my life, I tell you. It was so tough, my man. I didn't believe I could come out of it, but I did. So going through divorce of longer marriage and kids are involved, and coming out of that, both parties, it's so beautiful, and that's a great one. So seeing how experienced you are and how long you've been doing this fantastic work for, what is the number one issue married men talk to you about?
It is the lack of intimacy. That's the number one issue. But it's funny. I'll have so many men come to me, talk to me about, I don't like the level of physical intimacy and subsequently emotional intimacy in our relationship. I feel very disconnected from our wife. And what all of them realize is that the sex in marriage, or lack thereof, is just what we call the canary in the coal mine. It's an old phrase in America, meaning it's an indicator of some other bad stuff going on. It's not just the thing. You don't just fix the sex and everything's fine. No, it's a much deeper issue, a lot of dysfunction within the relationship. And what's funny is that dysfunction that those guys have is similar to the dysfunction that the guys who are going through a divorce have. The guys that are having a really tough time dating after divorce, the same dysfunction that they have. All of these guys have a very real fundamental dislike of themselves. They don't like themselves very much. They don't think much of themselves. They don't have a lot of self-respect. That's how they get into these situations. That's how they get into these relationships that are fundamentally incompatible. And why, when you hear their story, and some of these stories that they tell are awful, really toxic, terrible, abusive things. And you're like, what in the world are you doing sticking around this for so many years? And they will give a lot of reasons, a lot of stories, and I made my vows, and it's very important to me. But really, when you hear all these things and you kind of peel away layers of the onion, so to speak, you always get to the same root cause. It's because I don't like myself very much, Ralph, and I've just put up with all this nonsense from a lot of people in my life. You realize he may put up with an abusive spouse, but he also puts up with some not so nice friends who take advantage of him. And he also has a boss at work who pushes him around and hasn't given him a raise in the last 10 years. And on and on and on. So it's just illustrative of a much deeper issue within himself, and one that I too can relate to from years of a dysfunctional relationship and other relationships in my life. I didn't like myself very much at all. And so I had to go through the process like people do in the military. What do you do when you go into the military? They cut you down to nothing and they rebuild you from the ground up. They whittle you away emotionally, mentally, and physically to nothing. And then they rebuild you into what it is that they will make you a good soldier. But a lot of us men that have achieved some level of success will tell you is I had to hit kind of rock bottom to wake me up and make me realize I have some work I need to do. That was my rock bottom moment 13, 14 years ago, was that divorce. And it involved infidelity and all kinds of awfulness that really made me question a lot of things. And, but like a lot of men that have gone through that process will tell you, it was hell. It really was. And there were times where I'm not sure I can get through this. But now looking back on it, I'm glad I went through it. That's what all men say. I'm glad I went through that. It was terrible. It was awful in the moment, but man, I learned so much about life, about me in the process. And in the end, I'm a better guy as a result. And I'm able to help out so many more people as a result of this.
Exactly. And one thing I've discovered about challenges and hard times is at times we go through all of those difficult moments, not necessarily because we really, really, really need it, but because of the individuals that can only understand these things through our voices. No matter how I teach this person, he may not get it until you step into the picture and say, okay, this is it, this is it. Then he grabbed it. Okay. At times we go through challenges because of the destinies that can only learn from us and not others because of our unique talent, abilities, and voice. So I got that. But I'm a bit curious. Okay. So now, are you remarried or not yet?
I am remarried. Yes.
Oh, beautiful. And how's it going so far?
It's going very well. Yeah, we've been together for 9 years now, and, she's a wonderful person. She's, from Germany. She's a physician, one of the most interesting, yeah, wonderful people I've ever met.
Amazing. And that's so good. I'm so happy for you, man. So finally, my
Thank
man,
you.
yeah, what would you like to leave the audience with, like a final thought? And to those folks who like to reach out to you, make a purchase of your wonderful books, or ask you questions, or be a part of the wonderful things you're doing, how can that be possible?
First of all, everything about me and my work can be found at helpformen.com. But if you're a guy, the one thing I will leave you with is this, men out there, and I've already hinted at it earlier, don't go through this alone. Whether it's through our community that we have put together or some other community, maybe a community you put together yourself. Maybe you want to start your own help support group within your community, which is a little difficult to do starting from scratch. It behooves you as a human being to recognize you need other human beings in your life. I often say that there is in our prison system, for example, all over the world, prisoners, there is the notion in some countries that if we put them in what's called solitary confinement, which is zero connection with other humans, you're in a little closet all by yourself, that is a form of torture, a lot of countries say, and they have outlawed it. Simply because we know that if you take people away from other people and put them in a little room alone, they go crazy. Their mental health suffers as a result. And a lot of you men going through the horribleness of divorce, being cheated on, a wife who's disconnected from you, and then you further isolate yourself and say, I don't need help. I can deal with this on my own. I don't need to talk to other people. That's kind of a weak thing. Who needs other people? You're going to suffer even more. You need to get out there and connect with other human beings. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you a human being. Welcome to the club. And there are a lot of other people out there, whoever is listening to this right now, there are a lot of other people who have gone through the same thing that you're going through right now. And a lot of people have been there, done that, and found a solution to it. And they may be able to give you some tips, and they may be able to just lend an ear to your situation, and you realize you're not alone. And every man will say the same thing that finally raises his hand. A man who says, help, says, I am so glad I did that. It took me from here to finally here. And if it wasn't for that help, I wouldn't have realized, or wouldn't have achieved what I've achieved so far. And I'm a perfect example of that. If it wasn't for that one therapist saying you need to reach out to other men, I wouldn't be here today. And I wouldn't be giving it back and helping out so many other men. So guys, reach out for help. And we happen to have a community just for that. That has a lot of benefits to joining. Helpformen.com/join. Check it out.
Beautiful. Reach out for help, man. I got that. So that's going to be the end of the show, my man. Thank you for coming and thank you for sharing those beautiful stuffs with us. It means a whole lot, Ralph. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. I do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That was a